Hello and welcome to Credit Versio's Q&A live for Wednesday, April 20th. I'm your host, David Michalek, and every week at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, we all come together here live on Facebook and YouTube to talk about credit. And as a consumer credit expert with nearly a decade of experience, I've conducted well over 10,000 one-on-one credit coaching sessions, and I'm looking forward to helping you understand and improve your credit. Joining us today is America's #1 credit expert. He has 30 years of experience in the credit industry, including years working for both FICO and Equifax. And he's one of the very few experts that actually comes from inside the credit industry. Let's welcome John Ulzheimer. John, welcome.
Hey, David. How are you? I apologize for being AWOL for the past few weeks, but I'm thrilled to be back with you on a Wednesday night.
Well, you know, we weren't here last Wednesday, and we didn't send out an email or anything. So I hope people kind of figured out that we were taking a week off, and here we are again. Welcome, Louis, and Al Mustafa is back. All right, welcome to today's live. So, John, you actually put a post up the other day, maybe it was yesterday, that I thought was great, and it's a conversation that I've had. Man, I can't tell you how many times where I'm talking to somebody about their credit and they have a repo, which is a charge off, but they have an auto repo. And they're like, whoa, hold on. I don't understand how come it's on my credit report. I actually turned the car in. And so it was a little post you made, and I thought, let's talk about the difference between, if there is one, a voluntary and an involuntary repo and the impact of that on a credit report.
Sure. So the reason they have two different names is because they're two different things. Clearly, when you go out and borrow money, and these repos are generally associated with cars, but really they apply to almost any mode of transportation that someone is financing. So motorcycles, boats. I mean, if you're wealthy enough to afford an airplane, then certainly an airplane. And then yes, garden variety automobiles and such. And if you take out a loan to buy one of those things and you pledge that asset as collateral for the loan, which means that mode of transportation, I'm just going to say car, but everyone watching understands that really it's all the other things that I listed.
Yeah.
So you've pledged that car as collateral to secure the loan, and if you don't make your payments on your loan and you go into default, then the lender can choose to take back the asset, which means in fancy terms that they're going to try to repossess it. Now, obviously we've all seen the variety of television shows, whatever, repo this, repo that, and it shows them how clever they can come in. Repossession is actually legal theft. It is legal and authorized theft. So it's basically a group of people who cleverly figure out a way to come steal your plane, or cleverly figure out a way to come steal your car, find it, and then figure out a way to get it, and then take it back. Perfectly legal for them.
Isn't the definition really that the property really does belong to the lien holder? You just have equitable title.
That's right.
Which means
that's exactly right. And that's actually that's a really good point, because if you think about all the things that people ask us on credit applications, do you own your own home? Well, I'm not sure. I think I do. A bank owns it because I'm paying a bank for the next 30 years.
Yeah.
But I'm the one who lives in it, and I'm the one who maintains it. So it's actually a really good point as to that kind of distinction between who is actually the owner of the asset, you, or is it really a bank? I mean, ultimately it's whoever has the title, and the title holder is the owner of the asset. And while you're making payments on a loan, you don't have title. So there's obviously some legalities there, but ultimately what it amounts to is that you don't really own it. You don't have the title yet.
The saying has been like, if you think you own your home, try going up 6 months without making payments.
Yeah, that's right. Or cancel your homeowner's insurance.
You're right.
Or if you live in a flood zone, cancel your flood insurance. Or if you live at the beach, cancel your wind and hurricane insurance. If you think you own your home, do all those things, and let's see how long it takes before you go into default.
Yeah.
So back to the repo thing. If you are having a hard time making your payments, you have two choices, right? I mean, you can give back the asset, or you can not give back, not give back the asset. And,
you can be on the run.
That's right. You can essentially be on the run with something that you think you own, but you don't really own. So the giving back of the asset is generally referred to as jingle mail, which means that you are voluntarily going to give back the asset. And so kind of metaphorically, you're mailing your keys back to the lender, hence the term jingle mail. I'm not sure how often that actually happens, but it's a cute
I've
way
never
to
heard
say
it in the deck. Even back when I used to be an F&I manager for Saturn, you know, if we all remember GM's unfortunately failed experiment, the Saturn car company. I don't even. This is going back to the early '90s. I've never heard of jingle. If I have, I've completely forgotten about it. But I like the title.
Yeah, jingle mail. It's a nice
Jingle
way of saying voluntary repossession.
Okay.
You're mailing back your keys. Obviously that's a more what I would call kind of professional way of ending your relationship or moving to the next step of your relationship with the lender is that voluntary repossession component. The alternative obviously is to not give your stuff back.
Yeah.
Which means that they're going to come and engage the services of a repo man or a repo woman or a repo person who's going to come and take back the asset. Now, from a credit reporting perspective, the Metro 2, as we've talked about ad nauseum on these Facebook Lives, that's the credit reporting language that is used by furnishers to identify information on a credit report. And there's great precision, or the ability to have for great precision in Metro 2. And so it is actually not only an industry standard, but also systemically possible for a furnisher of information to clearly indicate that something was a voluntary repossession versus an involuntary repossession. So from a cosmetic perspective, when you look at a credit report, it's not really a secret as to how something was disposed of voluntarily or involuntarily.
Yeah.
But I can tell you from a credit scoring perspective, so maybe from a higher level, there is no difference in scoring systems. So a repo is a repo, and while it's likely to be less expensive in the voluntary environment than it is in the involuntary environment, because all those costs to repossess the vehicle or whatever, plane or whatnot, they just rack that in to what you end up owing when they determine what your deficiency balance is going to be after they liquidate the asset. And so let's say it was $500 to repossess your car. I have to think it's more expensive to repossess an airplane because you have to have a pilot to come and fly the plane out. So I suspect that it's considerably more expensive to repossess an airplane. But whatever the cost ends up being, that just gets rolled into whatever you owe as part of your deficiency balance, the cost to repossess. And so ultimately it's more expensive to do the involuntary method versus what it is to do the voluntary method, but it still doesn't mean your score is going to be any better. Now, certainly a lender may have a different policy with respect to how they treat applicants who have voluntary versus involuntary repo, but that's independent of how the credit scores consider it.
Yeah. So essentially, when we look at, I mean, it might say repossession in the remarks, but really what we're looking at as far as the payment status, this is a collection charge-off. Is it not?
Yeah. What normally happens is when something is repossessed, it's liquidated, so it's sold, and whatever the proceeds are from the sale minus fees and costs, that is applied to whatever your balance happens to be. And that amount is normally less than whatever your balance is. And so it leaves what's referred to as a deficiency balance. It's the amount that was unpaid by liquidating the asset. And so that deficiency balance, you owe it. And it's not part of your loan, so you don't have payment terms, meaning you can't make payments for 36 months on your deficiency balance. Generally, that is charged off, and you're stuck with now a charge-off for the deficiency balance.
Mike just made a comment. He says there's a serious echo with John's sound. I just realized that no, John, it's not anything on your side. I had echo cancellation turned off when I did an update on the software. Mike, or anybody who wants to comment, is John sounding a lot better now as of about maybe 20, 30 seconds ago?
Yeah, ask me a question about inquiries. Hello. Testing.
All right. I'm going to assume that all is good because I did get an alert. I I just ignored it. Derek is with us. Hello, Derek. Good to see you. Okay, good. All better. Yeah, that's what it was. Mistake on my part. My apologize. Okay. Oh, and kind of a random question from Mike. It says, "Hey, David and John. So John came across a video of you and Larry King talking about credit secrets. Are you still affiliated with this?" That's old. That's a long time ago, isn't it?
Yeah, so I shot that. I mean, it had to be an infomercial because I didn't do anything else with other than an infomercial. I think that
Yeah.
infomercial is almost 4 years old. And Larry passed away. I don't know if that infomercial is still running. But to the extent they ever run it again, then we have a contractual relationship when it is running. But to the extent that it's not running, then I don't have anything else with those guys.
Yeah. I don't. I've never seen it anywhere except for on the occasion, like if you look up your name. I'm sure Larry King has a pretty high relevance in search, so he comes up on occasion. So that's the only way I ever found it. Let's see. All right, so looks like we got one question from Candace, and then we'll roll into another subject to talk about. Candace Jones. Oh, we love this one. We get this one at least once a month. Hello, first time on. Welcome, Candace. Happy you're here with us. Just joined. Should I remove old addresses? If so, how do I? I'm assuming how do you do it on the platform? Talking about Credit Versio. Okay, so John, I think we can make the assumption that Candace is under the impression. You did a video and an article for us on this about removing old addresses and people being under the impression that somehow that's going to disassociate themselves from the items in question. Let's just leave it at that. So maybe you might want to give Candace a real quick overview on the validity of this assumption.
Well, this is a match logic topic. So you're right, Candace. Or whoever brought it up. There's definitely no shortage of information floating around the intranet world about strategies on how to disassociate yourself from information, and one of them is to try to get addresses removed from your credit reports. So first off, accounts aren't associated with people based on addresses. All three of the credit reporting agencies use what's referred to as matching logic to associate information that's in their credit file database with a particular consumer when they compile that particular consumer's credit report. And I need to be careful how much information I talk about here, but y'all are just going to have to trust me. There are about 13,000 combinations of information on your credit report that is used to associate a consumer with information in a credit file database. This is actually probably a pretty good time to kind of explain what you probably hear me toggling back and forth between credit report and credit file. And I think there's an assumption that those two things are interchangeable and they're the same thing. They're not the same thing. A credit file is basically a database full of disassociated information that the credit reporting agencies maintain. So it's the credit file database. And then when you apply for credit somewhere and the lender performs a credit inquiry, the credit reporting agencies using this matching logic will go into that gigantic pool of information and basically fish out everything that they believe belongs to you using this sophisticated matching logic. And then whatever they find that they believe belongs to you, they use that to compile your actual credit report, and then they score that, and then they deliver it to the lender for whatever use the lender is going to use it for. And so there's this impression that if you can get rid of addresses, that somehow you're going to fool the credit bureaus into not being able to associate you with, I assume, negative information, right? I mean, you wouldn't want to disassociate yourself from positive information. It seems silly. So I'm assuming it's negative information that you're trying to disassociate with, not you, Candace, but just people in general. And I can tell you that, understanding what I understand about matching logic, that's number one, it's not really true. And number two is that there are literally thousands and thousands of other ways that the credit reporting agencies use to associate, information in their credit file with a particular consumer. But I get it. It sells books. It makes for good blogs. It makes for good YouTube videos. I need people to understand the reality of that so-called strategy relative to kind of the effectiveness of that so-called strategy with the reality of the credit bureau's matching logic. The credit bureaus are not stupid, I can assure you. They use a lot of methods to connect consumers with data. And if you've ever heard of kind of the waterfall approach of think of a gigantic waterfall with about 13,000 rocks that hit the water on the way down, or that the water hits on the way down, and that's really how the matching logic works.
Well, and
in fact, it's I'm sorry, David. In fact, the matching logic is so good that it from time to time will accidentally associate information with people with whom it doesn't actually belong. And so that's where you get mixed files, right? You have people who have junior seniors, you have people who have similar names, who have lived at the same address. And so again, this matching logic is so flexible, and it should be flexible. It's so flexible that sometimes it even makes mistakes and associates more information with a particular consumer than is actually correct.
Yeah, Candace, and again, we're all making the assumption here that you're consistent with what a lot of people believe, that if I remove old addresses, somehow that's going to help me to dispute better accounts on my credit report. Just keep in mind too, there are a lot of people even in the credit repair space, myself included, who at one time a long time ago believed that was true, and then that's why I have John on here. That's why I have other people who come from the industry that are on this Facebook Live to give people real answers and explain how things work and don't work, because it's just credit and credit repair and just credit in general is a space where people have a lot of bad ideas. They just tend to circulate over and over and over, and hopefully we're making a little bit of a difference here, explaining how things work and just as importantly how things don't work. Candace, thank you so much for the question. Derek says, I have a question. I asked this already and you might have answered. If we didn't, Derek, I didn't see a question. Feel free to post it. Just make sure it's short and to the point. Oh, it looks like you did post it down below. Deji is back. Hey, good to see you again. And Derek, so if I get a letter from the original company that I had and they show I had an account but is in collector now or collection now, should I redispute or wait for it to fall off? Derek, I think my answer is probably going to be a little less popular. My opinion is if it's your debt, you should pay it. I mean, that's really what we should happen. Again, and this kind of goes back to what John was saying to Candace about this misinformation about removing old addresses. Again, I'm making the assumption that's what Candace was referring to. If I'm wrong, she's just looking to make sure information is accurate for the purpose of making information accurate, then that's a different topic altogether. But Derek, one of the things that gets recycled over and over and over in the credit repair space is never pay your collections, don't pay your debts, which is a bad idea. And John, I know you love to say this, but one of the biggest benefits of paying off a collection, apart from the fact that if you signed on the line that is dotted and you promise to pay something, paying off a debt ends a very adversarial and potentially dangerous relationship with a collection company or a creditor. By dangerous, I mean if they sue you, now they can levy your bank accounts, they can garnish your wages, and that's bad news all day long. So that's why you're always going to hear. You're not going to hear it usually from credit repair people because there's maybe some type of little angle they're trying to work. But if you have a debt, pay it. Don't worry about re-aging it, John. That's a question that a lot of people in this space are afraid of. Like, well, if I pay it, it's going to re-age and it's going to stay on there for 7 years, and maybe you can alleviate some of their stresses and concerns about paying off debts, even if it's a charge-off, about it being re-aged.
Yeah, the term re-aging is kind of a dirty word in the credit reporting industry, and what it generally refers to, or what it means, is that the date that is used by the credit reporting agencies for obsolescence, in other words, the date from which that 7-year clock starts ticking, which is a very important date and has to be accurate on a credit report. If it's not accurate, then A, it's incorrect credit reporting, which is you're not allowed to do that, of course. And number two is there's a possibility that it'll make a negative item stay on the credit report longer then it is allowed to stay per the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which we know is generally no longer than 7 years. A third issue with re-aging is the not specific to collections, but to trade lines, is that the date that's used for the obsolescence clock is also the same date used by FICO scoring systems to determine the age of a derogatory entry. So that's how FICO determines if, how old is this charge off? How old is this repossession? How old is this foreclosure? So there's a variety of reasons why that date has to be correct. And they're all kind of similarly important for a variety of reasons. Now, if that date is changed, which, by the way, that date can change. That date is not chiseled in stone. It can change. But the only reason it should change is if it's wrong and it's just being corrected. If it's correct on a credit report and you change that date to be more recent, and by doing so it is now incorrect, that is generally referred to as re-aging, because you are causing an item to now remain on a credit report longer than is allowed by law. And kind of the tangential problem with that is that now you've just made the credit scoring systems think that the thing is younger, and credit scoring systems treat younger derogatory entries differently than how they treat older derogatory entries. So the good news is that there is nothing that you can do with respect to anything on a credit report, whether it's a defaulted account or a collection or anything of the sort, that will cause that date to be more recent. So there's nothing in the Fair Credit Reporting Act that allows for that date to be changed under any condition. It doesn't matter. You can dispute it, you can ignore it, you can settle an account, you can pay an account in full, you can sue the collector, you can complain about it to the CFPB. None of those things will cause or give anybody the ability to change that date to a more recent date. That date, once it has been settled upon, cannot be changed.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so Candace, that's more of a, so let me just put it up real quick. Platform for individuals to dispute their own credit. Will it ever be useful to run a credit repair restoration business? So Candace, we are very big advocates of people servicing themselves, not hiring credit repair companies. The answer to your question is yes, but we're actually building white labels for very, very large credit repair companies, some of them who are looking at more or less getting out of the hands-on repair space and more empowering their clients to fix their own credit or to address their own credit concerns. If you want more, just email us, support at Credit Versio, and we can send you something. Okay, Derek, should I ask for some sort of letter after I pay, or does it automatically update on my credit report? So going back to Derek's question about paying a collection, and obviously our suggestion is always going to be to pay the bills, pay any debt that you owe. As far as the update goes, Derek, as far as it going from a balance owed to a zero balance, yeah, that should happen from the data furnisher. Whoever the collection company is, they're going to update it. But again, as John was saying, it's not a concern that's going to re-age it and make it stay there for 7 years. It'll remain as a debt that's been satisfied, and fortunately, contemporary scoring models from both FICO and VantageScore tend to ignore paid collections.
That's right. But I don't think there's anything wrong asking for some sort of document indicating that a collection has been paid in full or settled in full. I think that's a great idea, because you're right, David. Debt collectors, like all furnishers, and by the way, we just recently learned that there are 14,000 of them now. The CFPB identified about a decade ago that there were 10,000 of them. Well, the CDIA recently indicated that there are 14,000. So the number of companies that furnish information to the credit bureaus is going this direction, not this direction. So
it's funny. That's when you were up there, right? Yeah. So what we're referring to is,
by the way, that was unsolicited.
Yeah, well, I thought that was interesting because I happened to, I spent virtually no time in the seminar. And by the way, for you watching, what John is referring to is he and I both attended something called CreditCon that was last week. So there's a lot of people from different areas in the credit space that were there, and the CDIA is a major player, and they had a rep there for a very short period of time, and John happened to be on stage with them. And it's funny, John, because you've always said like 10, 11,000. I'm like, man, I always thought it was closer to 15, but I never really asked you about it. We never, hashed it out or looked it up. But it was interesting for me to be in there at the same time you're up on stage with them, and he's like, yeah, there's 14,000 data furnishers. I'm like, okay, that sounds more in line with what I've been with what I've been hearing. But that's a lot. That's a big increase in what, a decade? 4,000.
Yeah, well, the CFPB published I call it the green paper because the cover of the report is green, and I think the CFPB's color schematic is kind of a green and white color
Yeah,
schematic. So I
yeah,
always call it the green paper, but it's essentially a document that it's almost like a paper version of a documentary, and they profile the credit reporting industry. And one of the things that they identified, and the CFPB is an authoritative source of information. It's not like that. It's not like people don't believe the things that they say, right? That's
yeah.
they know, and they indicated about a decade ago. You can find that it's called Dimensions in Credit Reporting. So if you Google CFPB Dimensions in Credit Reporting, you're probably going to find it. I don't know how old it is, but I remember it's pretty old. And they indicated at the time that there are 10,000 companies that furnish information to the credit bureaus on a monthly basis. And so, but the CDIA is also an authoritative source. And
Yeah.
who else would know better than the trade association of the credit reporting agencies? And so to the
Right.
extent that he went on the record in front of hundreds of people indicating that there are 14,000, I think he said about 14,000 or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we were trying to identify, I think we were trying to identify, David, actually, it wasn't unsolicited. I did get it out of him because we were trying to identify the number of furnishers that are debt collectors, and then the number of debt collector furnishers that are medical debt collectors. And so we were trying to figure out how this new kind of policy in July, how many furnishers was that going to affect? And so he started kind of going funnel top down, 14,000 total, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, so that's where that came from.
Well, my takeaway from that was there's a lot more collection companies out there than I thought there were.
There are tons of debt collectors. That's right.
Yeah. Well, and I only imagine that business is going to increase over the next 5 years or so as we teeter on recession, at least according to Goldman Sachs, and now Deutsche is throwing their their hat in as far as their opinion goes. You know what, John? I know this is sort of a repair question, but I think this is an important topic when it comes to inquiries because, I mean, in the spirit of the fact that you did a deposition today talking about inquiries, why stop there? So, Deji, so the reason why I'm bringing this up, Deji, is usually I don't present to John any kind of we don't even really discuss any specific repair advice on the live that I do with John. The reason I'm bringing this up is how do you remove an inquiry from a credit card that was not approved? The reason why I'm bringing this up is so that maybe John can spend maybe just a minute or two explaining to you why this is ultimately kind of a waste of time. That disputing an inquiry when you got whether you got an approval or not is maybe not going to have the return, or maybe not worth the time and energy that you think it is, because you might not fully understand the impact of an inquiry on the credit report. John, is that a comfortable enough tee off for you?
Yeah, look, the inquiry, and so this is my 31st year in the credit industry. So I don't know what I know because I read Susie Orman's book or I listened to Dave Ramsey. I know what I know because I've worked in the industry for over 3 decades. And I can tell you from my seat, the value of an inquiry that is ascribed by consumers is way in excess of what their actual value is in the world of lending and credit scoring. So people think that they're way more important than they really are. And that's not anecdotal. I mean, it bears out in credit scoring systems. If you look at the kind of the hierarchy of information that influences credit scores, inquiries are at the very, very bottom of all of them. So even credit scoring systems believe that empirically, that they're the least important thing. And certainly consumers tend to be overly obsessed with inquiries. So that's number one. Number two, hard inquiries, which are the only ones that matter because soft inquiries aren't seen by lenders and they're not considered by scoring systems. Hard inquiry, the credit bureaus are required by law to maintain a record of companies that accessed your credit report. It's straight out of the Fair Credit Reporting Act. And so the credit bureaus can't just delete inquiries because you say, hey, I want you to delete my inquiries. That would put them in a contrary position to their obligation under the FCRA. So there's that, and they're not going to do that. They have to comply with the law or they get in trouble, right? So next, if you, this is a little bit complicated, but follow me. Inquiries are not furnished to the credit bureaus by their end user clients, meaning Citibank didn't furnish an inquiry to Equifax when you applied with Citibank. Cap One didn't furnish an inquiry to Equifax when you applied with Capital One. The credit reporting agencies themselves create the inquiry and then maintain that information internally when they see that one of their clients has accessed their credit file database system. It's their record. It's not the bank's record. It's the credit bureau's record. And because it's not furnished to the credit reporting agency like a collection is furnished or like your auto loan is furnished, there are different obligations in the FCRA with respect to reinvestigating information. The credit bureaus are only obligated to reinvestigate information that is furnished to them. They're not obligated to reinvestigate information that they just happen to have in-house. Now, that doesn't mean that if you have an inquiry on your credit report that has been caused by fraud, meaning someone applied for credit in your name fraudulently and it ended up with an inquiry. And it also doesn't mean that if you ended up with what's referred to as a fragmented or mixed file, meaning the information on your credit report really belongs to another consumer because the matching logic was too aggressive. 100%. In those scenarios, all three of the credit reporting agencies have gone on record ad nauseum, and we did it when I was at Equifax 3 decades ago. So this isn't a new practice. If we were put on notice that there are fraudulent inquiries and or mixed file inquiries, we wouldn't go to the end user to investigate it. We would investigate it ourselves internally and remove them. There's another method for removing fraudulent inquiries that has nothing to do with the credit bureaus. You go directly to the end user and you let them know, hey, I've been the victim of fraud. Not only did you pull my credit report and now I have an inquiry on my credit report from your company, but there's also a possibility that there's an account opened in my name and someone, which is way more important than the inquiry. The heck with the inquiry. I want to know who's out there defrauding me and running up a credit card debt in my name. That's 1,000% more important. And so that's generally another way of getting rid of inquiries is you go directly to the end user and let them know that we may have a fraudulent account floating around out there. And what they do is they close the account, obviously. They probably charge back all the charges back to the merchant because the merchant is supposed to be the one who verifies that you are who you say you are, the consumer. And then they remove all the inquiries that they may have posted. They can do that. They have the ability to request the deletion of inquiries from the credit reporting agencies. So that's generally the practice that occurs when there are authentically problematic inquiries on a credit report.
Yeah, Deji, great question. And I wanted John to weigh in because that's just, again, another one of those areas where there's a lot of misinformation. And John, one of your favorite lines, one of your lines that's one of my favorites is, while it's true that an inquiry can negatively impact your score, it doesn't always mean it's going to impact your score.
Yeah, that's yet another myth that's floating around, and not a myth by the people who are on this call right here, but there are even people who serve as expert witnesses in my world who feel very comfortable being dishonest in their expert reports and suggest that all inquiries lower scores, which is, don't believe me, go to FICO's website. It's crystal clear that some do and some don't. If anyone knows anything about the deduping and inquiry buffering logic of FICO's scoring systems, the 30-day buffer, the 45-day dedupe, that stuff has been around for decades, and all you have to do is open your computer to be able to find that stuff. But the majority of inquiries, hard inquiries, don't even count. Because either they're too old, meaning that they're older than 12 months, and so systemically they're not even considered. B, if they're less than 30 days and they're mortgage, auto, or student loan, they're ignored. If they're older than 30 days, but they're within 45 days of similar types of inquiries, they're collapsed and only treated as one. So you can have all these inquiries all over your credit reports, but certainly not all of them are being considered. So to suggest that all inquiries lower scores is just either being consciously, is A, you're being consciously dishonest, which is a problem, or you really shouldn't be talking about it because you're not knowledgeable about the subject.
Yeah, exactly. And John, I was going to try to get a quick pause right there because this goes right to we're skipping ahead a couple of people, but this is very relevant to what you're talking about because they eat while they sleep. What if you went to a dealership to get a car and they ran your credit over 10 places now when applying for other credit products? They're saying too many inquiries. Can we remove the other 9? So you just talked about deduping. So maybe for eat while they sleep, you can just maybe take another 10, 15 seconds just to explain to eat while they sleep why those 9 inquiries are not going to be an issue at all.
Yeah, so if all those inquiries occurred within this, first off, for the first 30 days, none of those inquiries count at all. So if your score is lower because of inquiries, it's not because of those 10 inquiries, it's because of other inquiries that are older than 30 days. Even after those inquiries age past 30 days, so let's say day 31, they're all within 45 days of each other, and they will always be within 45 days of each other. So your shopping, or not you in particular, but whoever the example you gave, whoever that really applies to, their shopping experience would be modeled as one search for credit because that's what happened. They went to one car dealership, they're looking to buy one car, and the F&I manager at the dealership shotgunned their credit and tried to see if they could finance them through a bunch of different financing sources. And that's generally what happens. Can you remove the other 9? The only way you can have inquiries removed I'm not saying this is universally accurate, but normally if you were to follow kind of the letter of the standards is if they were fraudulent or they really don't belong to you because of a mixed file. But I can tell you that if you write a letter to the credit bureaus and tell them exactly what you just told us, which is, I went to a dealership, I want one car loan, some bozo ran my credit report a dozen times, I want you to remove all these inquiries. You've just admitted that they're valid inquiries. They're real and they're accurate. They occurred because these lenders pulled your credit report. The credit bureaus are obligated to be able to keep a record of that to show it's because of you. It's a consumer protection statute. And so they're obligated to be able to disclose that information to you. So I would suggest that you're not going to get a favorable response. You're probably going to get a letter from all three of the credit bureaus have the same or similar letter. And the letter basically explains that inquiries are non-disputable items, that they're a matter of factual access into your credit reports. And then they give you kind of a list of conditions by which inquiries can be removed, which would be things like for fraud or for mixed files.
Yeah, so eat while you sleep. The reason why I wanted to jump you ahead of a couple of the questions because John was just touching on what Deji asked, which was how do you remove an inquiry from a credit card you didn't get approved for? And it's not even a conversation worth having because there's a lot of misinformation about inquiry. So those 9 inquiries are having no effect at all because they're all considered to be one inquiry when they come together tight like that. Okay, I love this question. All right. There you go. You are very welcome. John, you ready for this one?
Go to the bottom question that Mustafa just posted.
Let's see.
I'm not saying his name right. Okay. So I want to address this. I want to address this before because I know we're running low on time and I want to get to this question.
Yeah, we're coming down to the end of it here. So
Mustafa,
says this.
Yeah. Okay. Go.
Let me just read it real quick. This inquiries are caused by credit bureau's contract with Credit Karma, Credit Sesame, Experian that soliciting that you are approved when. I'm sorry, this is a little hard one to read. Then when you applied,
I can paraphrase that if you want.
Yeah, if you want to paraphrase it, go ahead.
So, Mustafa, what you're referring to soft inquiries, okay? When all of the inquiries that are posted by Credit Karma and Credit Sesame and Experian's Consumer Direct, or direct to consumer group, those are all soft inquiries. You can have 10,000 of them. They're not lowering your scores because soft inquiries are not considered by credit scores. The only type of inquiry that is considered by credit scores are hard inquiries, and even then, not all of them have a measurable impact on your score. So you you probably have pages and pages of soft inquiries on your, when you pull a copy of your own credit report, you can see them all there. And if you have a relationship, and I have a relationship with all three of those entities that you listed. I have a Credit Karma user account. I have a Credit Sesame because I have to. I write about these companies, and so I have to take the consumer experience. I have pages and pages and pages of soft inquiries because these companies are constantly accessing my credit reports, because one of the things that they do is they give away free credit reports and they give away free credit scores. And so, and again, that is a requirement of the FCRA. The credit bureaus have to maintain a list of companies that access your credit report, which is why you see all those inquiries. But this isn't even a debatable topic any longer. The difference between soft and hard inquiries is very, very simple. Soft inquiries are not seen by anybody, including lenders. They're not, and they don't count in credit scores. So all the entities that you just listed, those post soft inquiries. No one has a hard inquiry with Credit Sesame because Credit Sesame isn't a lender. No one has a hard inquiry with Credit Karma because Credit Karma is not a lender. No one has a hard inquiry with Experian because Experian's not a lender. So they're vastly different types of inquiries, even though they all kind of fall under the 50,000-foot umbrella of inquiries.
Excellent. So Angelina says, just placed my letters in the mail today. Great. Congratulations. And why don't we, what are we doing on time here? About 43 minutes. Okay. So we're coming down to the end of it. I love this question. I mean, if we want to talk about getting down to a basic question. Now, Dexter, yours is more of a credit repair question. Same thing with Andrea. Those I don't really bring on the screen when John's on with us because this is just purely credit education. But if you want to send that question to support at creditversio.com, we'll certainly answer that for you. Okay. The Pena family. Why are there 3 credit bureaus? Why not just one?
Well, there are way more than 3 credit bureaus. I can assure you of that. If you pull that, remember we talked about that CFPB green paper earlier on in the Facebook Live. If you now I'm telling you, before I was suggesting that you go look at it, now I'm telling you to go look at it. So Google Dimensions in Credit Reporting CFPB, and you'll find it. That document, among a lot of other interesting factoids, I think contains a list of the consumer reporting or credit reporting agencies. The CFPB required all companies that identify as a credit reporting agency that were larger than some, I don't remember if it was based on assets or they used some sort of a minimum threshold metric. And if you were a credit reporting agency and that you exceeded whatever the threshold that the CFPB put in place, you had to identify yourself to them. And if you look at it, there are tons of companies. And of course, we only talk about Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion because they're the big 3. But I'll rip off 3 more that you may or may not have ever heard of. There's Inovus Data Solutions, which is commonly referred to as the 4th credit bureau. They're just as big as the big 3. They just don't do the same thing that the big 3. They don't do the same thing. They don't sell credit reports to lenders, and they don't have credit scores based off their data. A company called NCTUE, the National Consumer Telecom and Utilities Exchange. Yeah, think about a credit bureau, but just for utilities. Mm-hmm. They're just as big as any of the big 3. Yeah. And then think of LexisNexis. LexisNexis is kind of like the credit bureau, but for insurance claims. And if you've never seen your LexisNexis reports, I would suggest you strongly to never print them because they are hundreds and hundreds of pages. I thought I pulled mine and it was like 200 pages, and I was like, oh my God, mine's 200 pages. I was the lightweight, dude. People are like, yeah, mine's 400, bro. Don't even come at me with your 200-page report. Yeah. So you have a ton of other SageStream, Check Systems. These are all credit reporting agencies or consumer reporting agencies, but most people don't know about them because they don't know about them. But they certainly do exist, and there are certainly way more than 3.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes when I get that question, John, people think, well, they get that word bureau in their head. And when we think of bureau, we think of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Bureau of Land Management. People think that these are government agencies. And maybe with a question like that, that's so very like raw and simplistic, I think sometimes people don't realize that the bureaus are are for-profit organizations and they're competitors. It's like saying what why is there why is are there In and Out Burger, Five Guys, and McDonald's? How come there's just not Five Guys?
Look, I think one of the Pena question, part of the Pena question is why is there three? Why isn't there only one? Number one, they're not a government organization, so it's free market, and
Hmm.
any individual or other company that wants to get into the business of being a credit bureau can absolutely do so, and it's really really good business. And so that's why you have all these companies that want to get into the business of being a credit bureau, or that did choose to get into the business. Equifax spans three centuries. They were actually formed in the late 1800s, so they're not 300 years old, but they span three centuries.
Yeah.
So again, these companies have been around for a really, really long time. Actually, the youngest of the credit bureaus, for people who don't know, is Experian. They purchased the data that used to be part of TRW's credit services division in the mid 90s, and TRW doesn't exist anymore in the credit bureau business. They certainly exist. They make brake pads, upper control arms, valves. They make automotive parts, but they just don't have a credit services division any longer. But it's,
Yeah.
every time you go to apply for something, some company is pulling one or more of those reports, and the business model for the credit bureaus is comical, right? Companies give them information. These 14,000 companies give them information for free, and then turn around and buy it back from them. It's a fantastic business model. How there's no cost of goods, but
Hmm.
there's a cost of their product. So it's a fantastic business to be in. Obviously, it's got some downsides because I don't know how many people who are walking around with their pin indicating they work for a credit bureau,
Yeah.
but nonetheless, it's a good business to be in.
So we got a couple of questions. Deshi, I'm going to swing back around and answer your question because it's on Facebook. But we do have a YouTube question. Unfortunately, I don't see YouTube questions when we end the live for whatever reason. But I'm going to put this one up because Luis Pena Jr.'s got a flair for the dramatic with the whole once and for all. It's very Shakespearean almost. We got to get and a lot of caps. So let's just get to this one. He asked, "True or false? Once and for all." I feel like we need like the guy who does the movie voice. That does the trailers for movies. Does LexisNexis, Clarity Services, Inovus supply data to the big three when you dispute an account?
Well, so I appreciate the question, but I'm going to answer it like I answered a lot of my deposition questions today, which is I don't care if you're asking me a binary question. If it doesn't have a binary answer, then I'm not going to answer it with a binary answer. So Clarity is a subsidiary of Experian. They're owned by Experian. And they're an entirely separate database. So if you dispute something to Experian, then I don't know why they would go to Clarity, because it's not the same database.
Mm-hmm.
If you dispute something to a credit bureau, the only reason they would go to LexisNexis is if you're disputing a bankruptcy, because LexisNexis is the credit bureau's public record vendor. Liens and judgments aren't on credit reports any longer, so you wouldn't have a need to dispute those items because they don't exist on credit reports, and so there's no point in. So they don't even. That's not even relevant. That's not relevant to this particular question. Inovus, to the extent Inovus acts as a dispute agent of the credit bureaus, if that's true, then I don't know about that. Inovus is a competitor of the big three, and the only product that I'm aware of that they market and sell to users of credit reports is residential mortgage credit reports. And so CBC Inovus is actually what their name is. CBC Inovus sells tri-merges or residential mortgage credit reports to mortgage brokers, but I'm not aware of them doing anything with respect to facilitating the disputes that are sent to the big three. If you dispute something on your Inovus credit report, then certainly they have an obligation to correct it. But I don't believe that they act as some sort of arm of the dispute to the big three. The big three do that through eOscar and use the same industry standard forms And I've been involved in that process for long enough to know that there isn't some mysterious company that called Inovus that's facilitating that behind the scenes like the Wizard of Oz is doing it. So I guess once and for all, the answer to those is no, other than LexisNexis, which acts as the credit bureau's public records vendor. But I'm not sure that's even a secret. That's pretty common. The bureaus disclose that on their reports.
Yeah. Well, now it's Inovus. LexisNexis and SageStream. I think they merged a little while back, didn't they?
I don't know who owns SageStream.
I'm pretty. If you go to LexisNexis, I think now it says LexisNexis / SageStream. I think LexisNexis absorbed them, and I think it was pretty recent. Okay. From the Pena families, that's awesome. Thank you. Al Mustafa, you two are fantastic. Keep up the good work. Glad you enjoyed. And that's bringing us up to 52 minutes. John, I think that's going to be good for us today. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We have a pretty good turnout today. Appreciate that. And we will see you next week. John, thank you again for joining us today on a Facebook Live. Always appreciate your contribution.
Thanks, y'all. We'll see y'all next time. Take care.
Take care.